Hi, I'm Paul Rabideau, and this is our fifth lecture. Today, right now, we're talking about listening and building empathy through listening. So I just want to review some of our concepts and get more deeply into them. So the first three, the S, O, and L, are the nonverbal behaviors, and what do they communicate? Okay, what is being communicated? I mean, communication we hear is mostly nonverbals, right? So what do the nonverbals communicate, either good or bad?
They communicate either interest or lack of interest.
Okay, yeah, that's really big. If am I interested? I might need to develop an internal dialogue just to get myself interested, but I can promote interest by doing some of these nonverbals, right?
Do I have time to listen? Like you see, sometimes people are like, you see, they want to walk away.
Okay. Yeah.
They're kind of like.
Yeah. Do I? Yeah. I might be thinking, do I have time for this right now? And that thinking will interfere with my listening. But I don't want to communicate that. Or maybe I do want to communicate, right? Maybe I do want to communicate. I don't have a lot of time right now, and I could do that non-verbally, or I can communicate a relaxedness and like, no, this is I got all the time in the world for this, and that's a nice feeling. Maybe it's not true, and I can. I don't want, maybe I don't want to communicate I have a lot of time here, and that's fine, but that's some of what nonverbals will communicate. I think sometimes we think of nonverbals as more true, as more honest than maybe what is being said. Right? No, I have time for this. I have time for this, and that contradicts my nonverbal. Sorry. What else might nonverbals communicate?
I think they communicate concern and care, like whether you actually, whether it matters to you or not.
Yeah, does it matter to me? Do I care? Does this mean something to me? Yeah. Yes, that's good. Yeah, and this is a very important setting to set up. There's the setting for relationship and helping, right? That I care, right? So, am I calm or anxious? If I can show a calm, or I can be a non-anxious presence, like that's nice. Things may be a little chaotic, and if somebody can not be chaotic, could be not anxious, then I might have some confidence that, okay, they can think right now. I mean, they're an attractive person. A person who can be calm is attractive, right? And interest and curiosity. I think a lot of it is curiosity. I need to look curious, and I need to be curious. And can I make myself curious? I can do that. I mean, do I have enough control of myself, of my brain, to be curious? And you can tell if someone's really curious about and interested, and that I'm engaged. I'm engaged in this right now. I'm not distracted by other things. I'm really engaged in this. Okay. So I don't need to say a thing to create this atmosphere right now. Right? Okay. Now we talked about about the verbal responses and the affirmations, and so what is a function of an affirmation? When I intentionally make a sound, in response to the speaker, what am I trying to do? What do I want to do?
You're portraying that you understand and that you are following
Yeah,
along.
I'm starting now. So I've set the scene with my body language of interest, okay, and concern and attentiveness, right? And now I'm going to start demonstrating understanding, right? So it further shows that I'm listening and that and showing interest. But as listening, I am starting to demonstrate understanding, because if I had said "wow" at a point that that wasn't a wow, like that would have been weird, right? But I said it at exactly the right moment, and that showed that I was paying attention, right? And it also affirmed. Or if I had said "ugh," that would have showed something completely different, and maybe that would be the right response, right? And then he swallowed the worm, ugh, right? Okay, and that would have been appropriate. But if it's and so I'm not even using words, maybe, and I'm showing, and the timing is right, so it shows that I'm following. And then probing questions, right? So probing questions, so that actually, the phrase probing questions can seem aggressive. So I don't want my questions to be aggressive or to feel like they're probing, but there's a purpose for probing questions. And that is to help the person to go deeper in their story. So speakers sometimes, especially at the beginning of the relationship, may just talk about the facts. Okay, so I was in this country and I went to that country, and then I came back, and then I went to another country and I came back, and it was a little, I felt a little, it was a little hard. So it's mostly facts and on the surface. But to really help, I want to go deeper. And the way to go deeper is to ask questions. Now, I might ask questions about the facts. Give me more. So when you went back, like when was that? And how did you travel? And when you got there, what happened first? So I'm just asking for more facts, but just fill in the story with a little more information. And so I'm getting the person to go deeper. Right? And then maybe deeper still is, what did that feel like? What did that feel like to then go back after all that time? And so we had the facts that you went back, but what did that feel like? And that helps the person go deeper into their story, right? So they were just operating on the surface. Now some people will go deep. Unfortunately, Alan went deep quickly, right? And then I did what I did. So, but some people don't go deep quickly, and so I can ask a question about, well, what did that feel like? It'd probably be better to instead of always saying, and what did that feel like? And what did that feel? What did that feel like to return and see that the people you knew weren't there? So I'll paraphrase part of what the facts are and ask for feelings. And maybe he hasn't thought about that. And maybe he will have said, I guess I was upset. What do you mean by upset? Yeah, upset's a kind of generic word. I was angry. Yeah, you were angry. You were angry that the people weren't there. Like, well, maybe I wasn't angry. I was more disappointed. Okay, so you were disappointed. Okay, and now I've learned something, and he has learned something also. And all I'm doing is asking questions based upon the information that was just given to me. In early days of computers, someone developed a program that would hear what the person said and then repeat it back in question form. So I went to Germany. Well, I went to Germany. So you went to Germany. And they would just do that. And they found it had some therapeutic value, right? Because it seemed like the computer was listening. Right? And then maybe another question I could ask is, well, so what did that mean that no one was there? What did that mean to you? So going deeper to not just the facts and the feelings, but what did it all mean? Because that's where, what I believe about the facts is more important than the facts. And one person may say, it was okay because I knew I'd see them later, and I know they're busy, right? Busy with the work that we're doing, and then okay, it didn't mean anything. I didn't expect them to be there. It would have been nice, but I didn't expect them to be there. Or someone else in the same situation would say, well, I was gone a long time and I expected them to be there. I'm like, it was okay, but I really expected them to be there. Well, maybe it wasn't okay. So I asked questions. I'd ask questions, and I want to say this. Well, the purpose of asking questions is to get them to talk, right? Because when people talk, then their brain is firing. All parts of their brain are firing when they're talking, okay? And they're thinking. I mean, they're thinking out loud. We say that. They're thinking out loud. And they're thinking about the issue. And they're gaining a deeper understanding of their own problem. And then maybe they'll gain insights. They will gain insights into their problem. Okay? So I may right there know exactly what the issue is and the solution. But it is much, much, much better if they come up with the answer and not me, right? Even if it takes weeks. So the way they'll come up with the answer is not by listening to me, it'll be by listening to themselves. So I had a situation once. I had been counseling with a young lady who had been dealing with drinking. And she had stopped drinking. And but one time she came into the office and she sat down hard and she said, there's something I haven't told you. And I've been doing well with my drinking, haven't been drinking, but I smoke marijuana every day, all day long. It's not a problem for me. It really doesn't create the problems that drinking did. And she talked for 45 minutes about why smoking marijuana every day, all day long was not a problem. Right? And, she was a Christian and going to church, and I could have responded by saying, do not be drunk, but be filled with the Holy Spirit, or any number of things that would have made sense, that would have been true, but not persuasive. So I wanted to be effective with her, and so I just listened. I asked questions, and at the 45 minutes later, I was like, okay, what I've heard you say is that the drinking's going well, that created problems in your life, but smoking marijuana every day, all day long, is not creating the same problems, right? Right. Okay, I'll see you next week. And I thought, I think I've got her, right? And so she comes back next week, sits down hard again and says, I've been thinking about what I said, and it's not true. Okay? And then she went on for another 45 minutes describing how marijuana has had the same effect, getting a job, keeping a job, relationships in the family, and so forth, creating many of the same problems. Right? Okay. So all I did was listen, and okay, I'm just telling you the best story I got. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other ones that wouldn't illustrate this point. But all I did was listen and to her story and ask questions. And so you're saying that smoking marijuana every day and all day long isn't really creating problems in your life. That's right. That's what yeah, that's right. It isn't. Okay. I'll see you next week. So she gets to hear herself. I summarize or paraphrase, and she gets to hear another person say it. And then, so there's a lot of thinking going on, and especially when she's talking. Right? So it is better, even in that, so this is what I hear, and it is better always to ask a question than to make a statement. If you can avoid, or I should put it this way, if you can ask a question, if you have a thought and you can make it a question, that's always better than making a statement, right? Okay. And so I think I've just described, why it's better that and there's multiple reasons, but including that if I'm asking a question and they're responding to it, I could have made a statement saying, this isn't good for you. This would create problems like this and this, but I want her to say that. I want her to say that. I'll explain this more in our next session, but because I want the client to learn how to solve problems for themselves. I could give answers. I mean, I've seen this before 50 times, right? But they haven't. And I want them to give the answers and learn how to figure these problems out for themselves. And if I'm giving the answers all the time, then they need me for answers. And I don't want them to need me for the rest of their lives for answers. I want them to learn how to figure these problems out. So I might even say, you know what? Between now and when I see you again, look for some verses in the Bible that relate to anger. I could give them, I could say, I'll email you my study on anger. And it includes every verse in the Bible that has the word anger or wrath. It's 30 pages long. Right? I could do all the work, but it'd be better if they did the work. And then they would learn how to solve their own problems. So let me ask questions instead of making statements. And also, it increases motivation. If they come up with the answer, now they may come up with the answer because I asked a question. Yeah. Do you think that is helpful to do it that way? And and now they're working through the idea of helpful, and they say, I think it is helpful. I think in certain circumstances it's helpful, and maybe other times it's not helpful. Well, they've just come up with quite a lot all by themselves, and I knew that 3 weeks ago. But they're like, I think I'm going to try that. Okay, so they gain an insight, and they go away with motivation. And there's two things I want them to leave with an insight, more understanding, and the motivation to follow up on that. If I'm making a lot of statements, answering all the questions, they're like, yeah, that's right. And they're like unlikely to act on it. But if I ask a question, then the statement shows up in their brain, and along with it, motivation. Okay? So ask questions. And to just say a little more about reflections and summaries is you have experienced, I'm sure, when you're having a conversation with somebody and they keep repeating the same story over and over again, right? They just keep saying the same thing. And they're like, yeah, I've heard that before. I mean, why do they keep saying it? But if I reflect on it, or summarize it. Okay, so what I hear you say is that you were really angry when your brother took your car keys without asking. Yeah, I was. It helps the client. I mean, of course, you're demonstrating your own understanding, and that's good for building empathy, but it also helps the client move on. So now he has heard that I understand that story. He doesn't need to say it again. Okay? And so these reflections or grander summaries also help the client move on. When we demonstrate understanding of them, now they can move on and go deeper into their story. Okay? Okay. So I like this. Okay, wait. Okay, W-A-I-T. Why am I talking? Right? And when I'm trying to help somebody, I should be asking myself this question all the time. If I'm talking, why am I talking? Because if I'm talking, they're not talking. And the purpose or the best way of helping people, helping them grow, helping them deal with their issues, is for them to talk about it. So why am I talking? So maybe I'm asking a question, right? And I have a reason, and I need to. Why did I ask that question? Okay, because they seem to be stuck, and I'm trying to help them go deeper. Okay? Or I'm telling a story about myself. Okay, a little self-disclosure. Or I'm telling a story about myself. Why am I telling this story? Because the minutes I'm using up to tell my story is keeping them from telling their story. And I find myself telling a story, and then this other part of my brain this is a nice thing about the cortex too, is it can supervise my thinking. So I could be talking, and then I could be thinking, and in this case, maybe I'm saying like, this is going on too long. How do I end this? And I'm telling this story. But why? So I ask myself while I'm talking, what purpose is this serving? And maybe there's a good answer to that question. It's demonstrating that I'm describing a similar experience that I've had, and I think that will be helpful to them. It'll create more closeness between us. Okay, that's why I'm talking. But I may say, like, this has gone on too long, and my talking keeps them from talking. And I want to be talking. I want to be talking maybe 10 or 20% of the time. And I want them talking 80 or 90% of the time. Okay? And when I'm talking, almost all of my talking is asking questions. Let the wise listen and add to their learning. That's the purpose of this, or that's the method of helping, is I'm going to listen and I'm going to learn about them. I can't help them if I don't understand them. And sometimes that's what we do, right? We enter into helping, problem solving too quickly, and we haven't listened enough. Though good advice lies deep within the heart, the person of understanding draws it out. Okay? Honestly, I think that the person in the room who has the solution to this problem is not me, it's them. I need to draw it out of them. Okay? The one with the good advice is them. They are experts on themselves, and I think they're the ones with the solution. And my job is to draw it out, okay? Through understanding, through empathy, through a relationship, a therapeutic relationship of empathy that's been created by good listening. Okay. People heal when they talk. Okay, Freud's first patient called what he did talk therapy. Nobody had ever said those words before that, not, at least not recorded. Talk therapy. Oh, you do talk therapy. You helped me. Talk therapy. You didn't, do surgery on me. You did talk therapy and you helped me. And David said, "For when I kept silent, my bones wasted away." Okay. And James, therefore, confess your sins to one another. Like, speak to each other in agreement to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. So praying is an important part of that, but talking to another human being is an important part of that also. When we confess to one another, we're healed. When we talk and gain agreement with what healing comes, right? So God knows this. Speaking is very important to God. It's very important to us, made in His image, and this is how healing happens, is through speaking. So I need to know, how do I get the other person to speak? And that's through the skill of listening. Right? Listening is an attitude of the heart. Remember, we said it's a value. It's a way of being with somebody. And by the way, when I first learned about active listening, solar, it was in a business context. I was a consultant, and the group was being taught how to listen as a consultant, to check your understanding, to paraphrase. And it was very exciting to me. It was years before I did anything with counseling. And I just started practicing on everybody. This is my family and just everybody. And why not? Why not be a good listener? Then people will say, "Well, you're a really good listener." That feels good. And you can just do it. You can just do these 5 things and get better and better at them, and not just when you're trying to help somebody. It's an attitude of the heart, a genuine desire to be with another, which both attracts and heals. When I was in school, I could see that half my class were people who, I bet people have said to them all their lives, "Boy, you give good advice. You should be a counselor." Right? And I could see their confidence in knowing what the answer was and what advice to give. So that's not counseling, right? And you're seeing that, giving advice, because the answer is coming from me, and the answer does not come from me. Even if I could be 70 or 80% right in the first time we meet, we can do much better than that if it comes out of the client. And if you are that way with people, you will attract people. That will be attractive, because people will see you as safe, and you're a great listener, and people like to be listened to. People like to be understood, right? And then this is how healing comes. And you can get good at this, and that's, I said, 60 or 70% of what helping is about. And you don't even need to go to 2 years of graduate school to do that. That $60,000 in 2 years of your life, that's the other 20%, right? So, but you can do most of it just being a good listener. One of the best ways to persuade others is with your ears, by listening to them. So that young lady, I probably spoke 2% of the time. I spoke a few minutes. At the end, I did a summary. And then she left, and she came back, and she was persuaded of a completely different view. Right? And we want to be persuasive. My job is to help. Okay? My job is not to discharge my duty to tell the truth. right? And sometimes in our churches, I talk to him and I hit him right between the eyes with the truth. I use this verse, and this verse, and he went away. Right? He looked humble when he went away, and it probably was humbled and ashamed, and will never come back again. Never come back again to talk, and nothing was achieved, and the problem was not solved. Instead, this is a commitment. This is a commitment of time to listen and to understand, and to create that relationship that will lead to them coming up with the solution. And it's not that I don't, the other 20 or 30 or 40%, you have some knowledge about how people change and maybe, how addiction works, or how this conflict in your marriage can be disrupted. And, so that is good. That stuff is good. And that's what takes 2 years and $50,000. But most of it, 2/3 of it, can be accomplished just by listening. The frequent failure of parents to cultivate their capacity for listening has a profound impact on their capacity for parenting. They do not still their own voices so they can hear and draw out the voices of their children. The best parenting I ever did was with my youngest son, who wanted to go to a big school somewhere east of the Mississippi, and he applied to 10 or 12 big schools, and got into a few of them, and gratefully the most expensive ones he dismissed. But I really thought, and my wife really thought, that going to a small Christian school would be a better fit for him. And his older brother did go to a small Christian school. And so my youngest son knew about it, and that was one of his options. But then there were all these other big universities. I thought he would just get lost. And so he was pretty sure that that's what he would be doing. And we were pretty sure that was not the best thing for him. And so this was a really difficult situation. But we had months for it to resolve. And I said to him at the beginning is, Tim, I don't know how this is going to happen, but I believe at the end of this, you and I are both going to be happy with your decision. But I probably didn't say your decision that early on. I said, we're both going to be happy. But at some point, I knew that the only way that that was possible was to just keep the channels of listening and talking to each other open. That was the only way that we were going to arrive at the same point together and be happy. So we could not have been further away. So over those several months, I really tried to listen non-judgmentally. And the non-judgmental piece is really important, because if I kept saying, no, I don't like that, no, I don't like that, I don't think that's good for you, or made too many statements and offered my view too many times, he knows what I was thinking. He already knew what I was thinking. I did not need to repeat it. It was not helpful to repeat it. He knew what our views were. So I just needed to listen non-judgmentally, and non-judgmentally so that he would keep talking. If he stopped talking because I wasn't listening anyway, then we're doomed. I knew that. So for months, and we visited schools, and he eliminated schools, and he came down to 3 schools. And it's the last week before decision, and he got accepted to these 3 schools. We visited one, and he said, nah, the other big school, I prefer that. Fortunately, our small Christian college was still in the running. Right? And so we go out to Illinois and visit the University of Illinois, and we get lost, and we miss a meeting. I mean, the place is massive. And he's like, oh, but this would be such a great experience. I got to learn how to, operate in this environment. And I'm worried about that. And the flight is canceled. We drive 2.5 hours to get to an airport, and our flight is canceled. We end up in New York City airport instead of the nearby airport, and we need to take a $200 cab ride to get home at midnight. I mean, it was a disaster. He's like, no, but I got to learn how to. And on the way home, I said, Mom and I have decided that we're going to let you make the decision. Just felt like there was no choice. No choice. Otherwise, he'd hate us forever. But as that decision day approached, and he worked through the pros and cons, and I asked questions. Like, well, what about pros and cons? And we'll talk about that later this morning as a tool for making decisions and motivating and learning and motivating action. So he goes through all that. And actually, I said, let's take one more trip out to Grove City. It's Western Pennsylvania. And so, no, I've been there a lot. I said, no, let's go one more time. And as that was one of my tactics, let's look at that one last. And we learned some new things that were important. And in the end, on the hours, within hours, he had to make a decision. He said, you know what? I almost hate to say this, but I think Grove City is the right place for me. And then my wife just couldn't stay in the room. I mean, she was so anxious. And I said, you better leave. And I'm just asking questions. I said, well, what about this? What about this? What about that? I'm just asking questions. Now, sometimes the questions are leading. I mean, I'm a little anxious, but I'm just asking questions. I want him to talk, to go through these. I don't want him to listen to his kind of rebellion. Let's talk. Let's keep talking. And then he comes up with his conclusion. And I said, okay, are you sure? And my wife is like, don't. He's sure. Like, I think, no, I want to make sure he's sure. Right? So that was like the best parenting I've ever done. But I thank God, also, and he had a great experience there, and it was the right fit, right? But that was a months-long process of just self-restraint and knowing that this is the only way. This is the only way. And if I do anything else, he's going to shut down. But what I need to do is to keep him thinking by us talking. And me, he knows what I think, so, and just completely non-judgmental. Now, all that said, there of course are times when you share your thoughts, and that's okay. You just need to know what you're doing when you're doing that. And I did, some of the advantages of this, and we're doing. He's saying things, and I might affirm certain things. Like, yeah, I see the advantage of that program too, right? So I will affirm things and give my opinion. But if I overdo it, I'm gonna fail. Okay, drawing out the voices of our children, keep them talking. Okay, so let's just try to capture some words here. Like, what are the qualities of a good listener? And it had to be true, right? That the things I'm talking about and the things Steve talked about, is just a tremendous overlap between them, right? And he didn't even see my talk yesterday morning and said so much, that was in agreement, right? Of course, right? So what are the qualities of a good listener? Because these are qualities you need also.
Self-control.
Okay, yep, self-control. Yeah, self-control, right? Yeah. I may have all kinds of anxiety, and maybe it's visible, but I'm not. I don't want to act on it. Probably, right? Okay, anything else? A good listener, character qualities.
Patience.
Patience. I think maybe it's not meaningful, but I think it's meaningful. Love is patient. That's the first thing, right? Love is patient. Patience requires restraint, self-control. The word is long suffering. If I'm going to love, I'm going to have to suffer long, and I'm going to suffer long. And that's going to require self-control and sacrifice. And love is sacrifice, right? So patience. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Oh.
I think, like we were saying, the desire to get to the core issue, why they're thinking a certain way, and so that I think it requires a lot of patience, but just genuine desire.
Yeah, and ability to focus on the goal. Let's just keep the goal in mind, despite distractions and things I might do that would take me off the goal. And I do counsel people with that often is, what is your goal? You're going to talk to your brother, what is your goal? Because there's a lot you could do that would move you off your goal. Your goal is that he'll allow his son to come over and see your son, right? You could do a lot to express a lot of emotion that would you'd miss that. So being authentic and genuine, that was used yesterday when it came to parenting. Just being real, being yourself, and sometimes that's not pretty, but the opposite is just completely unhelpful. Being authentic, being who you are, being warm with people, right? Being confidential. If you're going to help somebody, this is extremely important. There is no, in certain matters, there is no helping somebody without them knowing that you'll be confidential, because that creates a safe environment, and people aren't going to talk if they feel unsafe, like that others are going to hear about this. And so, my wife will often delight in the situation where somebody approaches her and say, "Oh, I see Paul," and like, "Oh, I didn't know," right? So that tells the person, the client, that I'm not even telling my wife that I'm seeing this person, never mind what we're talking about. And that increases confidence because I'm being confidential. And we talked about non-judgmental and accepting. People, different kinds of things are important to people. Being loved, right? Or being respected, being trusted. But one of them is being accepted. Being accepted. Accepted. That feels so good to say that. Being accepted. I am accepted in Christ. Right? Accept one another. Right? Accepted. Now, so being accepted is just my thing, right? I mean, being trusted, being respected, all that's good. But being accepted is my thing, and I can tell you where problems with that came from my childhood, right? Being accepting to others, and of course respectful and trusting and so forth, loving, but being accepting, because they may tell you some crazy things, and they're going to worry that you're not going to accept them. Now, if you knew what I have done, you wouldn't accept me. Well, so you want to demonstrate the opposite. No, that you remain accepting of the person, even though we don't accept what they've done. Okay, respectful, low self-interest. Okay? Low self-interest. I'm not here for me. I'm here for you. Okay. Jesus demonstrated low self-interest, I think, in Philippians chapter 2, where even though he was God, he became a man. He didn't need to hang on to his godly attributes or his rights. And became a man, and not just a man, but a servant. subject to death, even death on the cross, right? So Jesus says, this blows my mind, that the Son of Man came to serve, not to be served. The Son of Man came to serve, not to be served. So he came to serve. He came with low self-interest. And that is very attractive to people. And they can tell, this is about, you're here to help me. This is not about you. And demonstrating low self-interest, because then that creates trust. Okay? Even consultants learn to show low self-interest in order to generate trust, even if, hey, I'm here to make money. I'm here to help you, but I'm here to make money. And I might be more concerned about money than you. But that's what they're taught in order to generate trust. But we be Christlike in this and have low self-interest. Okay? And so here's what's happening. So when we're being empathetic, when we're listening and empathy is being created, okay, that I'm gaining knowledge of you and you're knowing that I am gaining knowledge of you. So there's a knowing, a shared knowing. We now have a shared experience. I don't need to have gone through what you went through to understand what you're going through. If that were true, I mean, I've never jumped off a bridge or tried otherwise, kill myself, or I haven't had a parent die yet. They're in their late 80s. There's a lot I haven't experienced. I haven't had a chemical addiction. Can I help you? And there may be some doubt that you can help me because you've never experienced. But I'm going to, even if I have experienced that, maybe my experience is not exactly like your experience. So I'm just going to listen and gain specific knowledge about you, and I'm going to demonstrate that. And as that process is going on, if we could look at the two brains that are operating, the speaker and the listener, you start to see the different parts of the brain, or I should say the same parts of the brain, becoming more active in both listeners over that time, and the brains are starting to mirror each other. Okay? And so there's this connection, right? And in fact, there are chemicals in our brain, neurotransmitters, that are released, and we have this sense of connection with somebody. Okay? Oxytocin. So when I feel connected to you, it's because maybe we are or maybe we're not, but it's because that chemical has been released in my brain. And so by talking and demonstrating understanding and knowing, that kind of intimacy is developed. Okay? Now the word intimacy, say it in common settings, people think you're talking about sex. Well, intimacy is much more than that. It's knowing and being known. Okay? It's just what I like about counseling, is I get to know people without having them get to know me. Right? So they think, they feel this is an intimate relationship, and they don't really know anything about me. But this is about them anyway, right? But when we do get to know, when there's this sense of knowing and being known, and this oxytocin is being released, and there's a sense of connection, okay, that's good. That feels good. And it's intimate. And sometimes clients fall in love with their counselors because, like, wow, they're just so great. They really get me. But it's a completely artificial situation. But it happens. And this kind of connection occurs when people share a meal together. Okay, the oxytocin gets released. When a baby is nursing with his mother, oxytocin's released. When people have sex, oxytocin's released, which is why really people should not have sex before marriage, because it really develop this sense of connection, strong connection, which is really meant for a committed relationship, right? Not because God doesn't want us to have fun. There's a real reason neurologically for that. And so I think this is also why Israel had feasts. God wanted his people to eat together. And why the Lord's Supper, we do the Lord's Supper. It creates connection with each other. And Jesus knew that. God knows that. He gave us oxytocin. Right? But that's what's happening between the two people, and there's knowing, and intimacy is about knowing. So we're going to take a break here and come back, and we have 6 people. Some of you can do this if you want at rest, but we'll form groups of 3, and there'll be a speaker and a listener and an observer. And for a couple of minutes, say 2 minutes, the speaker will tell a story and the listener will encourage talking. The listener will listen, and the observer will note what's happening, and you guys can debrief, and then you'll switch. So we'll do 3 rounds of this, 2 groups, 3 rounds of it. And so the rest of us, if you guys want to do it, you can do it. And then we'll debrief, okay? So we'll start that exercise when we come back, okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah. You did mention that the effectiveness of our counseling depends on the client's willingness to change.
Yes.
And also, I and the client being able to build a relationship that creates impact.
Yes.
And I'm looking at a case scenario. You gave some example. This lady who had a problem with the drinking, you counseled her because she noticed she was having lots of problems in her life because of deep drinking.
Yep.
You counseled her, and she stopped drinking. But then she went and started smoking marijuana. And again, she came back to you,
Yep.
telling you, I'm having same problems, as I was drinking. So even marijuana is not helping, The question is, don't you think there could be a deeper problem than just, the drinking and the smoking that needs counseling other than just, asking her to abstain from drinking and smoking?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So is there that example of the young lady who was dealing with drinking and then smoking marijuana? The fact that she went from one thing and then went to another thing, isn't there a deeper problem? Definitely. Definitely. And she still struggles with addiction. That was several years ago, and at one point went on to heroin, and is still, kind of on and off with that. And there are definitely deeper problems. Right? Yeah. So we were not just talking about the behaviors on the surface of drinking and smoking or just using drugs, but we were talking about the underlying causes of that. Part of it was heredity. There's a lot of addiction in her family, but I mean, talking doesn't eliminate that. But talking about what was going on. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand that.
Yeah.
So during counseling, you are able to identify
Yeah.
that there are other underlying issues to be
Yeah.
addressed.
Yeah.
Just being on the side.
Yes. So what can you do, right? What can you do tomorrow? You could listen to somebody and help them come to a conclusion that this thing I'm doing is not helping me. And that surface behavior, or that was a symptom of much deeper things which you have perceived, right? And you can, the question would be, is whatever those deeper things are, do you feel competent to help with those deeper things? And you've really helped up to this point to help her rethink something and stop. And whether you could help with those deeper things at your level of training and experience, or not, right? And And in this case, there's just tons of stuff that would have taken more skill. But you've helped. You've really helped a lot at that point just by listening and helping her go from. This is one of the things we'll talk about today. I'll say quickly. Going from I do not have a problem to I have a problem is the biggest change anybody can make in counseling. Right? We'll talk more about that later.